She was the youngest on the range with no patch, no reputation, just a borrowed Barrett .50 and a clipboard full of wind data. The veteran snipers barely acknowledged her. One laughed. That record's older than she is. But she took position, adjusted calmly. One shot, direct hit, 3,540 meters. No one cheered. They just checked the logbook and froze when her name printed beside the new record. She handed the rifle back without a word and walked away. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of unrecognized heroes. The morning fog clung to Fort Blackwood's advanced marksmanship training facility as Maya Korkmaz made her way across the range. Unlike the others with their customized gear and unit patches, she carried only a weathered clipboard filled with meticulously organized wind data charts. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a plain cap, her BDUs lacking any insignia or decoration. At the back of the morning briefing, she stood unnoticed while feeling the stairs. Master Sergeant Blackstone, face lined with scars earned in conflicts most of the younger shooters had only read about, outlined the parameters for their upcoming extraction mission. This operation requires precision beyond standard parameters, Blackstone explained. His voice graveled from years of shouting over gunfire. We'll need covering fire from positions previously considered beyond effective range. Lieutenant Pierce, with his Olympic shooting background and a technical perfectionism, studied the topographical maps with intense focus. Beside him, Specialist Drake leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd seen his name in record books. Only our most experienced shooters will be considered for the primary position, Blackstone concluded, his eyes sweeping past Maya without pause. When personnel assignments were distributed, Maya received exactly what she expected. Observation duty. She would record atmospheric conditions while the real shooters practiced. As she gathered her papers, Drake's voice carried deliberately across the room. Weather girl thinks she's a shooter, he remarked to appreciative laughter. Maya's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her clipboard. She allowed herself one deep breath, eyes briefly closing before her expression returned to neutral. No reaction. Never a reaction. Throughout the morning, she moved between observation points, documenting wind speed, direction, humidity, and a dozen other variables that could affect a bullet's trajectory. She watched as even the veterans struggled with the day's difficult conditions. When Pierce missed his third consecutive shot at the 2,800-meter target, Maya made a notation. Seeing her writing, Pierce scowled. Something to share with the class? He challenged. The wind at your position reads differently than at the target, she said quietly. There's a cross-current at the mid-range marker. Pierce turned away without acknowledgement, but adjusted his next shot, using almost exactly the correction she would have suggested. He hit the target, but said nothing. By midday, frustration permeated the range. Even Drake, whose 3,400-meter record shot had earned him near legendary status, couldn't maintain consistency at extreme distances. The conditions were deemed impossible for record attempts, though no one would admit defeat so directly. Maya continued her silent work, invisible except when someone needed the latest atmospheric readings, but those who might have noticed would have seen her eyes not on her clipboard, but studying each shooter's technique, mentally making the adjustments they missed, calculating the shots they couldn't complete. The afternoon wind picked up as clouds gathered over the distant mountains. Maya recorded the barometric pressure drop, calculating how it would affect long-range trajectories. The veterans huddled near the equipment shed, voices low but tense as they discussed the upcoming mission. 3,000 meters minimum, Pierce was saying, in mountain terrain with unpredictable wind patterns. The general wants certainty, Blackstone replied. One shot, one kill from a position that gives our extraction team maximum coverage. Drake shook his head. Even in perfect conditions, that's pushing the envelope. None of them noticed Maya within earshot, methodically checking her instruments. Her mind calculated distances, angles, and variables automatically. 3,000 meters was difficult, but entirely possible with the right approach. Lunch break came and the shooters gathered in the mess tent. Maya sat alone, notebook open beside her tray, making additional calculations based on the morning's observations. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Lieutenant Pierce approach until his tray clattered down opposite hers. "Your correction earlier," he said without preamble. "How did you spot that cross-current?" Maya looked up, momentarily surprised by the direct address. "The secondary wind flags showed counter-rotation compared to the primary markers," she answered. "It creates a spiral effect at approximately 1,500 meters downrange." Pierce studied her with narrowed eyes. "How long have you been with this unit?" 3 weeks, sir." "And before that?" "Various postings, mostly observation and data collection." He seemed about to ask more when Drake's voice boomed across the tent. "Pierce, don't tell me you're taking shooting advice from the clipboard carrier." Pierce's expression closed immediately. He stood, leaving his half-eaten meal. "Just checking her data," he said before rejoining the veterans table. The afternoon session began with equipment checks and range recalibration. Blackstone assigned Maya to the observation post, furthest from the action once again. As she walked away, she overheard Drake joking with the others. "Bet she's never even fired anything bigger than a service pistol. If only they knew." But they would soon enough. At her observation post, Maya meticulously recorded conditions as shots rang out across the range. The veterans were struggling even more in the afternoon conditions. Wind gusts caused unpredictable shifts, and the barometric pressure continued to drop as the storm system approached from the mountains. Maya watched Specialist Drake attempt his record distance of 3,400 meters 6 times in succession, 6 misses. His frustration was visible even from her distant position. After his final attempt, he slammed his hand against the shooting platform rail. Blackstone called a break, and the shooters gathered for a strategy session. From her post, Maya could see their animated discussion, the tension in their body language. The mission loomed closer, and they were no closer to confidence at the required distances. She checked her watch. The day session would end soon. It was now or never. Packing her instruments carefully, Maya made her way back to the main range where the veterans were already storing equipment. Blackstone was reviewing the day's data with evident disappointment. "Sir," she said, approaching him directly, "I'd like to take a practice shot." Conversation halted. All eyes turned toward her. Blackstone regarded her with surprise that quickly shifted to skepticism. "You ever fire a Barrett .50, kid?" "Not this model, sir," she answered truthfully. Nearby, Drake laughed. "You heard her, Sarge. Let the clipboard jockey have a go." Pierce, more curious than mocking, retrieved his rifle. "Knock yourself out," he said, handing it to her. "Just don't break anything." The remaining shooters gathered to watch, expecting brief entertainment before dinner. Maya ignored them as she methodically prepared her position, arranging her shooting mat in a configuration they hadn't seen before. "That's not regulation," someone muttered. She checked the wind using a unique hand technique, then settled into a stance that was slightly unconventional but remarkably stable. Her breathing pattern slowed visibly, controlled in a way that even Pierce noted with reluctant respect. Drake leaned against a post, smirking. "That record's older than she is." As Maya prepared for her shot, fragmented memories flickered through her mind. A younger version of herself watching someone demonstrate the proper shooting stance. A tattered photograph of a military unit she'd memorized every face from. A newspaper headline partially visible in a drawer she wasn't supposed to open. "Record disputed after mission." She pushed the memories away, focusing only on the present. The feel of the rifle, the calculations in her head, the minute adjustments for variables most shooters would never consider. One measured breath, gentle pressure on the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the range. Silence fell as they waited for target confirmation. Seconds stretched into a full minute before the radio crackled to life. "Direct hit, center mass." The range officer's voice held disbelief. "Distance 3,540 meters. Confirm." The veterans exchanged looks of shock. Blackstone grabbed binoculars while Pierce pulled up the digital targeting system. The impossible had happened on a day when their best shooters couldn't maintain consistency at far shorter distances. "Confirmed," Pierce finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's 140 meters beyond the current record." Drake pushed forward, demanding verification. "Lucky shot. Has to be." "Check the logbook," Blackstone ordered, his expression unreadable. As Pierce input the data, the system requested the shooter's full name for the record. Maya's voice was steady as she stated, Korkmaz, Maya E. The effect was immediate. Blackstone's head snapped up, recognition flashing across his weathered features. Any relation to Errol Korkmaz? Maya said nothing as she carefully handed the rifle back to Pierce, then simply, he was my father. The revelation hit the unit like a physical force. Errol Ghost Korkmaz had been a legend whose long-range shooting record stood unchallenged for decades until his sudden disappearance after a classified operation went catastrophically wrong. His techniques were no longer taught, his name rarely mentioned. Ghost's daughter, Drake whispered, using the call sign that had once been spoken with reverence. Maya didn't acknowledge him. She simply collected her clipboard and walked off the range, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Maya didn't look back as she walked away from the range, maintaining her measured pace until she was certain she was out of sight. Only then did she allow her shoulders to relax slightly, her breath coming in a long, controlled exhale. The hard part was done. The name was out there now, spoken aloud in a place where it had been deliberately forgotten. In her temporary quarters, she sat on the edge of her bunk and opened her laptop, the screen illuminated with classified documents she had spent years obtaining through channels that would get her court-martialed if discovered. Operation Longshot, the mission that had destroyed her father's reputation and ultimately his life. She knew every detail by heart, had reconstructed the scenario in her mind countless times. Her father hadn't missed the shot. He had refused to take it. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly closed the laptop, sliding it under her pillow before opening the door. Lieutenant Pierce stood there, his expression unreadable. Sergeant Blackstone wants to see you, he said, eyes lingering on her face as if searching for familiar features. Command center, now. The command center was housed in a reinforced concrete building at the center of the facility. Inside, Master Sergeant Blackstone waited alone, a thick file folder open on the desk before him. He didn't look up as she entered. Specialist Korkmaz, he said, emphasizing her true name. Or should I say Specialist Lel, as your enlistment paperwork states. Either is accurate, sir, she answered. Lel is my mother's maiden name. Using false credentials to enlist is punishable under military code. I didn't falsify any credentials, sir. I legally changed my name after my father's death. Blackstone finally looked up, his scarred face impossible to read. And your purpose in joining this unit under an assumed identity? Maya met his gaze directly. To restore the truth, sir? For a long moment, Blackstone said nothing. Then he turned the file toward her. Inside were photographs, reports, and a death certificate. Errol Korkmaz, decorated sniper, died in military custody while awaiting court-martial. The official report says suicide. Did you believe that? Maya asked without hesitation. Never. My father would never take his own life. He was murdered because he knew too much about what really happened. Blackstone leaned back, studying her with new intensity. You were what, 16 when he died? 15, sir. And in the 8 years since, you've dedicated yourself to clearing his name, how his techniques were classified, his methods removed from training. Maya's expression remained impassive. He taught me everything before they took him away. I've practiced every day since on private land, with equipment I built myself based on his specifications. To break his record. To prove he was right, she corrected. The mission that ruined him, Operation Longshot, required an impossible shot. 3,000 meters, mountain terrain, unpredictable wind patterns, similar to our current mission parameters. Exactly the same, Blackstone confirmed. That's why I'm here now. When I heard this unit was preparing for an extraction mission requiring long-distance cover, I knew this was my chance. Blackstone closed the file, his weathered hands resting atop it. Your father was a good man, one of the best shooters I ever served with, but his record was disputed, his methods questioned. He didn't miss, Maya said, controlled intensity entering her voice for the first time. He refused to take it. There were civilians in the target zone, not listed in the brief. He reported it, but was overruled. When the operation went forward anyway, 16 civilians died in the extraction. They blamed him. Blackstone's expression shifted subtly. That's a serious accusation, Specialist. It's the truth, sir. I have documentation. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the range had gone quiet as darkness fell. Finally, Blackstone spoke. Your shot today, 3,540 meters. Verified and recorded. He tapped the file. That's 140 meters beyond your father's disputed record. No one has come close to either mark in over a decade. The shot wasn't difficult, Maya said quietly, not with proper calculation and technique. Every shooter on this range disagrees with you, specialist. They were taught the wrong method, sir. After my father's disgrace, his innovations were discarded. The military returned to conventional techniques that don't account for all variables. Blackstone stood, walking to a wall, safe behind his desk. He entered a combination and removed an older, more weathered file. This one bore classified stamps and security warnings. Operation Longshot, he said, placing it on the desk. I was there. Did you know that? Maya hadn't known this. Her research had turned up the operation details, but not a complete personnel list. Then you saw what happened to those civilians. I saw a mission that went wrong in every possible way, Blackstone confirmed. The official report blamed your father's refusal to provide covering fire at the critical moment, said his hesitation cost us the element of surprise. And you believed that? Blackstone's eyes met hers. I believed what I was ordered to believe, specialist, until today. He opened the classified file, revealing photographs and reports that had never been included in the official investigation. Aerial reconnaissance showing the civilian compound that wasn't in the mission brief, communication logs with timestamps that contradicted the official timeline, and, most damning, orders signed by a general, now 3 stars, explicitly denying Errol Korkmaz's request to abort the mission due to civilian presence. Your father was right, Blackstone said, his voice heavy with the weight of long-buried truth. But sometimes being right gets you killed in this business. Maya stared at the evidence, emotions threatening to break through her carefully maintained composure. For 8 years she had known this truth but could never prove it. Now, seeing it confirmed in official documents, made her hands tremble slightly. Who else knows about this file? No one alive but me now. I've kept it secure, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know until today. Blackstone studied her with new respect. Until I saw you make that shot. The shot that proves your father's methods work. The shot that validates everything he claimed was possible. The next morning, the unit assembled in formal uniform at the memorial wall, where the names of fallen marksmen were inscribed. Notable achievements and records were listed on a separate plaque, a plaque that had once included Errol Korkmaz's name before it was removed. The veterans stood at attention as Blackstone approached Maya with a small wooden box and a unit patch that had been stored away for years. Your father always said shooting wasn't about hitting targets, Blackstone said, opening the box to reveal a shooting medal that had been officially rescinded. It was about protecting what matters. As the unit watched, Maya walked to the memorial wall where Errol Korkmaz's name was being re-engraved. She placed her hand on the fresh letters, feeling the cut of truth restored to history. Your shot wasn't just a record, Blackstone told her, as the unit stood at attention behind them. It was justice. The morning sun caught the tears Maya finally allowed herself as she looked at her father's faded photograph she carried every day of her journey. The man who had taught her that sometimes the hardest targets aren't measured in distance. Sometimes the most important shot is the one you refuse to take. General Hayward, the same General Hayward who had signed off on proceeding with Operation Longshot against her father's objections, was now very interested in setting the record straight now that similar circumstances had been documented. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history twice, Pierce observed, or the wrong side of a congressional inquiry, Blackstone added. 3 months later, Maya was still stationed at Fort Blackwood, but she was no longer just an observer. With her father's techniques officially reinstated into training protocols, she was instructing a new generation of snipers in these forgotten methods. Drake, initially her biggest skeptic, was now her most eager student. Never thought I could hit that far, he admitted after a training session. Distance is the limits in your mind, Maya replied. Dad taught me to accept defeat, but he taught me to refuse limitations. Pierce, now officially Maya's assistant, was working with a new student on the range, a young female soldier, pale auburn hair hidden beneath her cap. She wants to learn the Korkmaz method, Pierce reported to Maya. Maya looked at the young woman and noticed the same determination, the same hidden fire she'd seen in her own beginning. Good, she said, but first we'll teach her the most important lesson. Which is... Maya looked at her father's photograph, then at the mountains beyond the range. Sometimes the bravest shot is not pulling the trigger. That evening, Maya was reading her father's old notes when she found a sentence in his handwriting. The greatest victory isn't just hitting your target, but protecting what you're fighting for. Now she understood. Breaking the record was just the beginning. The real mission was clearing her father's name, keeping his values alive, and teaching future generations to challenge limits when necessary to do what's right. As the range lights dimmed, Maya looked one last time at the targets. 3,540 meters. But the real distance was much farther than that. 8 years, a lost father, a hidden truth, and finally the triumph of justice. Some shots are measured by distance, others are measured by the lives they change.